always, at Set C, we always begin all things by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all of those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all of the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. My name is Julissa Brown. I am the founder of Funding Impacts, where we're focused on supporting BIPOC entrepreneurs with investment readiness. And again, I'm so excited to dive into this meaningful conversation. Introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us about your remarkable work.
I've been with Bisocial Canada for about 5 years, and before I was working at Bisocial Canada, I'll kind of like step back a little bit and kind of share how I came to work here. So I studied economics in university, and I loved learning about, how do people make decisions, how do systems kind of work, but I felt fairly disenchanted with the models that we learned, which were based on a lot of assumptions that weren't true and didn't really seem to be helping. I wasn't fortunate enough to get to access to any community economic development at the time, just kind of looking at classical economic schooling. And so I tried a bunch of different things. And then I read this book called Donut Economics. Folks may have read it, may have heard of it. But the whole premise of the beginning of the Donut Economics is saying that, economic students are disenchanted with the systems that were being taught, with the models that were taught. They're no longer applicable. They're no longer helping. So we need 7 new economic models for the 21st century. The title model is the donut, which is a fun name, which I love. And the outer ring of the donut is the ecological capacity of the earth to support life. So what are all the systems that we need so that people, animals, plants can live? And then the inner circle is what are all the rights that all the people is what is the purpose of business? So if the purpose of business, again, is to maximize individual profits, we're going to get systems where we're trying to reduce labor costs, we're trying to pollute as much as possible because we're not having to pay for it. And so that introduced me finally to the concept of social enterprise. So really thinking about the business model from one focused on maximizing shareholder individual profits to how can we leverage the creative force of business, which honestly creates around you. The market is such a powerful force to instead create community wealth and to create community well-being, or community capital is the term that we use at Bisocial Canada. And so then I started to learn more about different social enterprise pieces. I'm very sad that social enterprise is not nearly as well known as it should be in Canada. I'm often explaining what a social enterprise is to folks. At Bisocial Canada, we use the definition that a social enterprise is a business with an embedded social, environmental, or cultural mission that reinvests the majority of their profits in that business. So most are nonprofits operating businesses, and this really confuses people. And you're like, okay, well, it's a nonprofit, it can't be a business, but it can. There are a lot of amazing social enterprises in Canada, as I'm sure call today are familiar with. And so the way that I kind of became connected with Bisocial Canada and the concept of behind Bisocial Canada is that we exist to advance and promote social enterprises. But like any business, a social enterprise, in order to grow and increase not their shareholder profits, but community well-being, needs to sell more goods and services. And so who is it that buys the most goods and services? Those are businesses and governments. They're the biggest purchasers. They buy in larger volumes. And so Bisocial Canada, the most of our work is actually on social procurement, where we work with businesses and governments to see about shifting their supply chain and decision making instead of just focusing on price and quality and ignoring labor rights, who owns the company, where the profits are going, what representation it provides, what their environmental aspect are, those externalities that I learned about.
Really the importance around ensuring that purchasing is, inclusive. So, Tori, tell us a little bit about the most rewarding part of working with Bisocial Canada.
I just need to hear a story about, one social enterprise doing incredible work and getting a contract to really feel like, okay, there's a reason we're doing this. And that really good example is this the city of Vancouver has a community benefit agreement policy, and this policy has been in the works for years. You know, they first started exploring CBAs in 2010 with the Vancouver Olympics, and then they finally have their policy, and Bisocial Canada supported advocacy for the policy. We've helped the city create toolkits, and we're now working as the independent third-party monitor liaison on the first project that's triggered by the policy, which is the construction of a multi-billion-dollar hospital in
Wow.
Vancouver. So this has been years of work, and so it's like that the policy requires that the construction, the contractor, general contractor, all of the subtrades have to look at our spend and how are we we make some shifts to achieve. Clean Start, an awesome social enterprise in Vancouver that employs people with barriers. They do drunk removal, they did sanitation during the pandemic, they do kind of like deep cleaning, and they work with people with lived experience from the inner city, and really kind of provide them with that supportive employment that so many social enterprises do a great job of doing. And so on this project, Clean Start recognized the opportunity and they shifted and started to do trailer and site cleanup as a new service. And because the project had that requirement, it created the opportunity for them to increase their sales and employ more folks. And because of the policy, the sub-trades had the motivation to, you know, shift who they were purchasing from previously and take that little bit of action to support that social enterprise. So it can be a really slow journey, but whenever you hear about a social enterprise, you know, creating supportive employment for people facing barriers, it's really like, okay, that's my big motivator.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like really witnessing that impact, but it really like makes the work all worth it. And so, speaking of like making things worth it, I know that you might have come across some challenges. So what are the key challenges in the social procurement and social enterprise ecosystem in Canada?
Oh, that's a great question. I've got lots of ideas there for some challenges. I mean, the procurement landscape is complex, right? Folks who aren't familiar with it,